Good evening. My name is Barb Van Hoyt, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2022 Annual Action Plan public meeting focused on neighborhood infrastructure. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here at this event. It is brought to you by the Community Development Division of the City of Colorado Springs. And our mission is to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable homes for all people in Colorado Springs. We manage the annual federal entitlement grants from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, to address the needs of low and moderate income residents, neighborhoods, and businesses. So the annual action plan that we're going to be talking about tonight is the formal document that lays out how we plan to use those funds to address the priority needs and goals that we identified in our 5-year consolidated plan. Meetings like this we hold each year in order to really hear from our residents and advocates about what people are experiencing now to help ensure that each year our plan is relevant to current needs as much as possible. So we hope tonight that you will share your experiences and ideas about what our neighborhoods need most now. This meeting tonight is one of 4 meetings we're holding this week. It's the 3rd. And all of which they're being recorded and they will be available on our annual action plan webpage. You can find that and more about the Community Development Division on the web at coloradosprings.gov/community development. And I will paste that in the chat box here in a minute or two. So now I would like to introduce Catherine Duarte. She is Senior Analyst in the Community Development Division, and she will talk about the meeting structure tonight and walk us through the action plan and neighborhood infrastructure activities. Take it away, Catherine.
Thank you, Barb. As Barb mentioned, I'm Catherine Duarte. Worked here at the Community Development Division for 5 years, and every year that we do this community outreach, I just really enjoy getting to hear from everyone. So just a few notes on just housekeeping on the virtual meeting format. This is a live event on Microsoft Teams, which unfortunately mutes those who are on your desktop. So to participate, for those of you on your desktop, use the Q&A box for any questions, comments, reactions, requests. And the first half, there will be some content from me, and there will be discussion in the second half of the meeting. So that's when we'll get to questions that we don't answer live. And if you're on the phone, callers may unmute themselves, and you can ask a question then, and you do that by pressing *6. As Barb mentioned, everything that you see here tonight will be on our website. So for those of you on the phone and you can't see what I'm referring to, feel free to go and check those out later. And then if you don't think of any questions during tonight's presentation, you are more than welcome to send them to us via email or phone at the email address here, communitydevelopment@coloradosprings.gov, or give us a call and leave a message at 719-385-5912. And if you would like to, for those of you joining us on your phones or desktop, or I'm sorry, your smartphones or desktop, you may follow along with closed captioning by pressing the gear button on the lower corner of your screen and click on captions and subtitles, and there's a variety of languages to choose from. So in addition to me and Barb, we have a couple of staff members here tonight, and I would just like to thank them for joining us and helping these meetings go really smoothly. We've got Naomi Clark, one of our project managers from the CDBG and ESG projects, and Christy Miller, our finance guru on our team. So if you have any questions that Barb or I can't answer, we've got a deep bench tonight, so thank you. So for today, as Barb mentioned, we have some videos just on how the how the 5-year plan works and how the annual plan works. Those are kind of foundational videos that you can find on our website. But tonight, we really want to talk about how our division puts the grant dollars to work on this topic, on neighborhood infrastructure. We will go over other types of tools and resources and partnerships that we use to accomplish the mission. And we'll talk a little bit about what we're planning in 2022 and get your take on that. Really what we're trying to get a pulse on is what you and your community or organization, if you represent a potential grant requesting organization, we want to hear what you are experiencing, and we want to make sure that this plan addresses that. And then of course we'll provide a timeline of how you can follow the progress of the action plan, and of course how to access the funds. So the whole purpose of this action plan is to tell HUD what we're going to do with the money. And we talk about HUD funding. We're talking about formula grants. The City of Colorado Springs every year receives a certain amount of money from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, based on several factors: population, poverty, housing costs, things like that. So while we don't know the 2022 congressional budget, we still have to go through the planning process and make an educated guess on what we're going to receive. So we're planning for a slight increase from previous years, and we're looking at a total of a little over $6 million in revenue just from program year 2022. And we get that money through 3 signature programs from HUD. The Community Development Block Grant, that's the biggest chunk of this pie that you see here at 56% of expected resources. And that's coming in, we're guessing about 3.5 million. And the CDBG program is one of the oldest block grant program, and it's very broad. It has a lot of flexibility on activities that it can fund. The HOME program, which is short for Home Investment Partnerships, that's the next biggest chunk. And that is our biggest source for affordable housing. That funds new construction for multifamily projects, down payment assistance programs, tenant-based rental assistance, assistance for operating costs for local community-based housing developers. And then lastly, the smallest, or sorry, second to last, our last funding program from HUD is ESG. It's the smallest pink slice in this pie, and that's short for Emergency Solutions Grant, and that's our main source of funding for homelessness services. And then the wedge that you see at the top, program income, that is revenue that our department receives from investments from housing projects that we've financed in years past. And that comes from loan servicing and payout, property payouts when a loan is fully paid off. And this year we're looking at a higher amount of program income just given the nature of the housing market. So this budget is, as I mentioned, dependent on a lot of factors. So we're just planning for a scenario, and as the planning process moves along, we will adjust accordingly on a pro rata basis across all programs. So when we talk about neighborhood infrastructure and facilities, we're really talking about CDBG. That's the only pot of funding that really covers what we're talking about. And the CDBG program, as I mentioned, is really has a lot of different eligible activities. But the great part about this is that jurisdictions have a lot of flexibility in determining which activities we fund based on community need. So the 5 activities you see to the left: infrastructure and facilities, public services, economic development, affordable housing, and administration, that comes from our 5-year planning framework. Infrastructure and facilities is next to affordable housing. That's the next biggest chunk of the CDBG pie. That is where we fund cool capital projects that make our neighborhoods a better place to be. So with the CDBG allocation, public facilities, that takes up, as I mentioned, 25% of the allocation, which in 2022 amounts to just under $1 million, about $884,000 that we can spend on capital projects. And the bulleted list here is our eligible activities for this. So acquisition of property, construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation of any sort of public facility or infrastructure or installation thereof. And it's really important that these projects are owned and maintained by public entities and are open to the public or to highly vulnerable populations, which we'll get to next. So this is not a comprehensive list, just some example projects that can be funded and that we've definitely funded in the past. Not all of these we've funded in the past, but some good examples of neighborhood facilities like schools, libraries, parks, playgrounds. Transit is one of those. It could be a facility or infrastructure. You know, we can look at a fixed building or parts of infrastructure, curbs and sidewalks, and again, facilities that serve vulnerable populations that HUD calls special needs. And we'll get into more of that definition later. So homeless shelters, domestic violence shelters, senior centers, things like that. So these funds have been distributed in two different ways in the past through competitive grants and direct awards. As I mentioned, it's important that the project owners be public entities, so nonprofits, public agencies, units of local government, so departments within the city, any faith-based organization, as long as they are a public entity. And the competitive and direct awards, they're kind of vetted in the same way. It depends on the community need. If there's a tie to an existing plan or project, you know, the urgency behind it, the special needs populations, and again, the need behind that, if there's a gap in services for those populations. And we really heavily vet the organizations, they're particularly the financial and organizational capacity you have to carry out this grant. And our staff runs some fabulous technical assistance workshops throughout the year, gearing up for grant season. So if you have questions about whether your project is eligible or whether your organization is ready to apply, feel free to reach out. The staff member who's covering public facilities and infrastructure is Paul Morrow, and his email is here. And of course, the unifying theme behind all of the projects that we fund is that they must directly benefit low-income populations. And we'll talk about how we can, how project owners can prove that. So locally, our target subpopulations are those experiencing homelessness, seniors, those with disabilities, and families with children. So when we talk about who benefits in neighborhoods, you know, there is the very technical aspect of qualifying a project, and then there's the larger narrative of how the whole community benefits from the project. On this map you see here, the yellow and purple map, it's a map of Colorado Springs, and the areas that are shaded purple are CDBG eligible neighborhoods. And that means that those boundaries that are shaded there are have a population where the residents, or more than half of the residents, are low income. So you see a lot of concentration in the center of the city and in the southeast and near east, pretty much most of the Academy corridor. So when we're looking at general infrastructure projects, if you see that a lot of our projects are in these neighborhoods, this is the data behind why that is. So there are two different ways to make sure your project qualifies, and it's the nature of its location and the nature of who benefits. So the nature of the location means that the project is located in a residential neighborhood where at least, as I mentioned, more than half, or at least 51% of all the residents are low to moderate income, and it has to benefit everyone in the neighborhood who uses it. So it could be a library, it could be sidewalks. You don't have to prove that everyone who steps foot inside of this project or on it is low income, but it has to be in a primarily low income neighborhood. And the technical parts of proving this, we can absolutely help you with pulling up that census data. And if you have other forms, other ways of showing your service area, we can work with you then. So the other way of knowing that you have an eligible project is if it primarily serves low-income people by the definition, by the service that it provides. So either the project owner income qualifies users through intake procedures. This would be like a legal aid organization like Colorado Legal Services. You have to income qualify to receive their services. So that's the beneficiaries are low income. Other groups presumed to be low to moderate income. This list here: domestic violence victims, seniors, disabled adults, those experiencing homelessness, migrant farm workers, people living with AIDS, or the project is in HUD speak of such a nature and location that the LMI status is presumed, so food pantries and things like that. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what we've done with our 2021 funds and how and the impact that they've had, as well as projects before in recent years. So most recently, we have funded our local transit organization, Mountain Metro. They put forward a project to make 25 of their bus stops ADA accessible and make general improvements. So we're in the process of bidding that out. And I just had a few kind of project characteristics here. We do like projects that have other sources of funding. In this project in particular, CDBG was just a portion, granted it was the majority, but they still had other sources of match and project funding. And this one is very different in that it serves multiple neighborhoods because of the nature of a bus system, right? It goes through multiple neighborhoods, but the location of the bus stops are primarily in the 5 highest needs zip codes: the west side, the downtown, very near southwest, and the southeast. So by increasing access for people with disabilities, it checks a lot of our boxes and makes the city a much more accessible place to be. And then secondly, we helped the Springs Rescue Mission expand their campus to create a welcome center. And this had very specific goals, not just, to build a building to build it, but rather having this extra space improves the intake area for guests staying at the shelter. They implemented some security measures to make sure that their guests and staff members are safe, and it also increases client engagement. We really, when we fund homeless shelters, the whole point of sheltering, according to best practices and in our opinion, is to connect homeless folks to housing. So this welcome center increases that client engagement aspect and improves access to case management. So we're really looking for a holistic view in these projects that we fund. And this was a high dollar project. We funded through multiple years of funding. We provided $750,000, and it was still just a fraction of the project cost. In previous years, we've done quite a bit of work. We worked with the city's community center network, and we have systematically gone through and made ADA and other system improvements to all of the community centers to make them more accessible. Work on HVAC systems to make sure they're more better circulation, more sustainable systems. In Meadows Park, we helped fund a an accessible, excuse me, an accessible playground for kiddos, and mentioned the Springs Rescue Mission campus expansion. We are also working with the local housing authority to retrofit and make many of their public housing apartments ADA accessible. There's a huge lack of accessible, affordable housing, and by working with the housing authority to go through their inventory and make them more accessible to some of their highest needs clients is a huge priority. Another big feature of our funds is that we can help implement some plans that we have put forward, like the Mill Street Neighborhood Plan. One of the top priorities in that plan was safety. So we were able to fund a complete retrofit of all of their neighborhood lights, as well as adding new light posts to illuminate areas where there's crime and make the neighborhood safer. Silver Key, we worked on their senior center facility improvements to serve seniors. Helped Concrete Couch acquire the new park that's now called Concrete Coyote, and that created open space for young folks. Assisted local domestic violence providers, revamped the Leon Young Pavilion in Hillside, and then helped out more homeless service providers like Homeward Pikes Peak, Salvation Army. And lastly, I'm really proud of installing hearing loops in a lot of city meeting spaces. When we report to HUD at the end of our program year about what we've accomplished, and you may have seen these reports when we post them for public comment, the outcomes are really just kind of number driven. How many people were served either through the neighborhood or through clients, but the impact, there are lots of other ways that our projects create impact in the community. As I mentioned, with the Springs Rescue Welcome Center, creating that space really helps shelter staff to connect folks experiencing homelessness and connect them to housing. And it just really, these funds we really try to make public facilities more inclusive, create equitable outcomes, and generally help our partners achieve their goals too, like increasing ridership per metro, improving access to services for vulnerable folks, and helping folks like those in Hillside celebrate their local history through their neighborhood parks. So with that in mind, this year we wanted to look at some projects that we could accomplish this year with those goals, with those values that I just mentioned earlier. So this year we are pledging to support local school district 11, D11, with neighborhood improvements that complement a lot of their plans for campus improvements. They have a facilities master plan that has recently come out, and given the direct connection between school quality and neighborhood quality to school choice and housing, we feel that this was a big need in our community. Secondly, as I mentioned, we really like to support our current city plans and our partners' plans. So we would like to commit to implementing the recommendations that come out of the health equity assessment that's coming out of the Southeast Community Plan. That's a planning project that is still underway, and that's very community driven. And we want to make sure that as many recommendations come out of that are ready to fund and can get going in the Southeast. And lastly, we want to address medically underserved areas by investing in the construction of a medical clinic in the Mill Street neighborhood. Lastly, your input here, we really want to hear from folks about what they're experiencing in their neighborhoods. If you're in an organization that is planning a capital project to serve the kinds of populations that we mentioned here, I'd love to hear about it. And if there's anything else, anybody at the table who, or anybody you believe is not at the table and we'd like to, and you would like us to talk to them, please let us know. This absolutely is in draft form. We put this plan together over the course of a couple months. You will be seeing a draft of this in December. So the purpose of these meetings is to just really kind of get the pulse on the goals that we've proposed and see what other priorities our community members have. So this is a rendering of the medical clinic that I referenced in the previous slide. This will address a lot of the needs that the downtown area has. It's a medical and behavioral health clinic that will be on South Tejon. We are a partner in this financing stack, and I'm really excited that it will address the kind of medical desert in the downtown area, and that's looking to be completed next year. Oh, this is my favorite part of the public meeting, where I stop talking and hear from you all. I have some prompts here for those of you on the phone. You know, we may have some questions in the chat, but just to prompt some conversation, we want to hear what you're seeing and experiencing, how we can make equitable outcomes a reality with these funds. We'd love to know if these annual goals make sense to you. What are you seeing that's working, what's not working, and if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, or concerns. And while we're, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No worries, Catherine. This is Naomi. I was just going to say, for folks over the phone, if you want to hit *6, that'll allow you to unmute yourselves. And then for folks joining us on the computer, you can use the Q&A area to type in any questions that you have. Sorry about that, Catherine.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the reminder. I guess while folks are getting comments in or any questions, I wanted to go over just the deadline. As I mentioned, we spend a few weeks putting this plan together, and on December 13th, we will release a draft of the annual action plan. It will have a summary of the public participation efforts, so you'll see where your input has been incorporated into the plan. And then early in the new year, we will host another public meeting to go over the plan draft, hear your questions, incorporate more feedback, make sure we got it right. And then in February, we'll bring it to council where they'll approve it, hopefully, when they'll approve the draft plan. And then at some point, we'll know what the federal budget will look like, and HUD will give us, we'll announce allocations. And then when that happens, this plan will no longer be a draft. We'll submit it. And then on April 1st, that's when our program year starts. So for those of you who are thinking about requesting funding, that's the date that you can start reimbursing if you have an approved project.
Catherine, one question that folks might have that we hear about this is, well, how do I, you know, if I think I know of a project or a need, how do I go about, you know, seeking funding or finding out about that?
You can reach out to us at the either the community development email that I posted at the beginning, communitydevelopment@coloradosprings.gov, or email the staff member, Paul Morrow, whose email I have also in one of the earlier slides. Capital projects are, you know, they're fairly complex. Some are more simple than others, but you know, it can take a couple years, maybe even more, from the planning process to final touch-ups and people being able to use it. So reaching out just to have a conversation about one, just to see if it's eligible is always worthwhile. And we can go through the more technical aspects of that. If you are a neighborhood resident and you don't, you're not with an organization that, proposes capital projects, I suggest reaching out to your council member about needs your neighborhood has, whether it's accessibility concerns, lack of community space or things like that. I will mention in previous years when we go out for public comment, we hear a lot about potholes and road maintenance. I will mention that these funds are not to supplant or take the place of a jurisdiction's maintenance fund. So, we can't use these funds to patch potholes. We really have to think about the direct benefit, again, to those vulnerable communities, and make sure that this is a project that complements something that the city is already doing and addresses, urgent community need. So it's kind of a long-winded answer. I hope that helps.
I'll add to answering my own question, which is that folks can also subscribe to our email newsletter, which when we do have information about either facilities or other funding opportunities, will be in that newsletter.
Hey, Catherine, this is Naomi. I think earlier in the presentation, you talked a little bit about the funding and the particular populations that funding targets. So things like seniors, families with children, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. We have kind of a general comment that was posted that stated that I have run into many persons, particularly seniors, who need a living situation under $1,000 in rent, more like $800 in rent. And I think that was, again, in reference to the clientele that these funds target. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that, or a little bit more about what it is that our funds do surrounding those particular populations?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so housing is the most critical need in our community, and we're very keenly aware. And with these funds, the neighborhood facilities and infrastructure, these aren't meant to be new housing funds. You mentioned, or I mentioned earlier, that we helped the Housing Authority help improve their housing stock by making them more accessible. That's helping the situation for a lot of their clientele, because a lot of their clients are elderly and have the kind of income that you described. So while these funds in particular can't help build new housing construction, it can support housing projects either by rehabbing existing facilities that serve seniors, or complement a housing project by addressing the infrastructure outside of it. We have other pots of funds. I'm going to scroll back to this CDBG pie. If you, we have other funds, the home fund that helps finance new housing construction. The senior population is a very high priority on our when we vet projects. Anything that helps seniors either stay in their home longer by rehabbing their current homes, or projects that build new housing projects that target seniors. About 5 years ago, we funded a senior living center called Hattler May. I believe it's on north side of Colorado Springs, near East Library, up on North Union, and that's a senior living facility. So that is an example of a project that a developer comes to us we help vet it, we help finance it. But this, the city doesn't, the city itself, we aren't a housing provider. So we respond to developers and project owners that come to us with projects to help finance. So if you're in that group, let us know if you have any questions about how we might be able to help.
Perfect. Thanks, Catherine. And just a quick reminder for folks over the phone, if you'd like to chime in, then you can hit *6 and that'll allow you to ask any questions. We didn't have any more questions in the chat for now.
Great, thanks. And that question or comment rather just reminds me, all of these are interconnected. We completely understand that, all of these projects that I listed here, that they're all connected to, folks living in the margins, to housing, to people's health, to long-term outcomes for families. So we really try to make sure that the projects that we fund in one bucket complement whatever we're doing with other buckets. So that's why we have some proposed projects for 2022. A lot of, these 3 goals here aren't housing related, but they are kind of related to housing. Some of the assumptions and values behind these goals that I didn't explicitly mention, but are here on the slide, is that by helping D11 with some of the neighborhood improvements surrounding their campuses directly serves families, because we recognize that stabilizing neighborhoods and creating more accessibility, that affects school choice, it affects school enrollments, it affects the outcomes for students and their families. Same with the health equity recommendations. They may not be necessarily housing related. We don't know yet. We don't know what those recommendations are for sure. The community still has to approve, kind of go through that vetting process, but we are committed to funding those, because we know that that helps people live healthier, happier lives in their neighborhoods of choice. Same with the medical clinic. People shouldn't have to have a car or take 4 buses to get to their doctor. Every neighborhood should have essential services like medical care. Any other questions? I do want to recognize we are mentioning the Southeast a lot, and we may have a lack of Southeast stakeholders joining us today, because I know there is a forum that hosts the Solid Rock Community Development Corporation is hosting on Southeast issues. So it was kind of an unfortunate double booking, but we do want to get the word out there that we're committed to equitable investment in the Southeast. So I know that our boss, Steve Posey, the head of community development, is talking there about our commitments in the Southeast related to housing, and we're talking about our commitments with these other funding sources. So we're kind of hitting it at multiple sides today.
Thanks, Catherine. This is Barb again, and that just reminded me to just invite folks to think about this even after this meeting today. If there are other, people in neighborhoods, neighborhood leaders, organizations that are supporting low and moderate income communities and neighborhoods around any kind of infrastructure issues, that we are always looking for more information about, what are the most important current needs that people are experiencing. We do a really deep study for the 5-year consolidated plan for these funds. And so each year we really want to get as much updated new information about what people are experiencing. So those of you who are watching, listening in, please help spread the word that we are looking for, wanting to hear from our community about what the most important needs are now.
So with that said, there's, as we've mentioned a couple times, we spend a few weeks putting this together. So if you're watching this later on our website, please send your thoughts over to us at the email on the screen, communitydevelopment@coloradosprings.gov, or give us a call and just leave a message and let us know what you think. We record all of that and make sure that we can incorporate what we can into the plan. But I know everyone has busy evenings, so if we don't have any live questions coming through the chat or through the phone, we can wrap up and everyone can return to your evenings. But I really appreciate everyone showing up, especially at another virtual meeting. I know that we've lived our lives with virtual meetings for a while, and it seemed like we're kind of coming out into the real world, but with numbers going up and with a lot of our community partners working with vulnerable populations, we kept this meeting virtual. So I just really appreciate everyone's patience and attendance tonight.
I'll add my thanks too. All right, well, we'll go ahead and end this meeting, and hope to hear from you if you have any other thoughts or questions for us. Everyone have a great evening.